She did not know he was watching. That was the part that would haunt her long after everything fell apart. Not the limousines, not the lawyers, not the cameras, not the cold look in his eyes when he finally revealed who he really was. No. The part that broke Brianna Cole down to her bones was knowing that on the night she made the choice that destroyed her future, Marcus Webb had been standing 10 feet away, disguised as a nobody, watching every single second. She had laughed that night. She had laughed loud and easy and thrown her arms around another man's neck. Right there in the VIP section of Club Onyx on Peachtree Street. Right there in her gold dress and $600 heels that Marcus had paid for. She had leaned close to that other man and whispered something in his ear. Something that made him smile the way a man smiles when he knows he has already won. And Marcus had watched. He had watched from the corner, in his worn hoodie and scuffed Jordans and the beat-up fitted cap pulled low over his face, sipping water from a plastic cup while everyone around him sipped champagne. He had watched the woman he loved, or the woman he thought he loved, become someone he did not recognize. Someone he was not sure he had ever truly known at all. He had not cried. Marcus Webb had not cried since he was 11 years old and his mother left for good. And he had promised himself that night, standing on the porch in the rain in Bankhead, that he would never again give another person the power to make him feel that small. He had kept that promise through everything. Through foster care. Through hunger. Through rejection letters and failed businesses and betrayal that would have broken anyone else. He had not cried then either. He had simply pulled out his phone, sent a 2-word text to his assistant, Devin, and walked out of the club into the Atlanta night. The 2 words were, "It's done." But how they got to that night, that is the story. And it starts, the way all great love stories start, with hope. Marcus Elijah Webb was worth $437 million on a Tuesday morning in March, and nobody in the Edgewood neighborhood of Atlanta knew it. That was the point. He had grown up in Bankhead, in a 2-bedroom apartment that smelled like mold and cigarette smoke, where the radiator clanked all night in winter, and the landlord came knocking on the 1st and 15th with a face like a fist. His mother, Sandra Webb, was a beautiful woman with a laugh like music and a weakness for men who treated her like furniture. She left when Marcus was 11. Not in the dramatic way people imagine, no big fight, no tearful goodbye. She just stopped coming home one Thursday in November, and by Monday, the caseworker had come to take Marcus and his little sister Keisha to the group home on Hollowell Parkway. Keisha was 9. She held Marcus's hand the whole way there. He never forgot that. The weight of that small hand trusting him, needing him, and him having nothing to offer but presence. He promised himself 2 things that November. First, he would never let anyone he loved go without protection again. Second, he would build something so solid, so permanent, so undeniably real, that no storm and no person could ever take it from him. He had spent the next 20 years making good on both promises. By 22, he had flipped his first property, a foreclosed row house in East Atlanta that he bought for $11,000 with money he had saved working 3 jobs since he was 15. He lived in it while he renovated it, sleeping on an air mattress in the kitchen, watching YouTube tutorials on plumbing and drywall and electrical work. He sold it 14 months later for $68,000. He cried in his car when the check cleared. The last time he ever cried. By 26, he had a portfolio of 8 properties. By 28, 12. By 30, Webb Equity Group was one of the fastest-growing real estate development firms in the Southeast, with projects in Atlanta, Charlotte, Memphis, and Birmingham. By 33, the kind of money Marcus had accumulated was the kind that made other wealthy men uncomfortable. Old money looked at him and saw disruption. New money looked at him and saw competition. And the people from Bankhead looked at him and saw a miracle. But Marcus did not feel like a miracle. He felt like a man who had outrun his past but could never quite stop looking over his shoulder. The loneliness surprised him the most. Success was supposed to fix that, he had assumed. Money was supposed to buy belonging. But every event he attended, Every handshake, every toast, every congratulatory email felt thin, like performance rather than connection. He had associates. He had employees. He had a penthouse in Buckhead that a designer had filled with expensive furniture he had never chosen. He had everything. He had no one. Devin Walker, his assistant and the closest thing he had to a friend, noticed it before Marcus admitted it. Devin was 31, sharp as a tack, loyal as a Rottweiler, and one of the few people in Marcus's life who was allowed to speak plainly. One evening in November, over takeout in the office that Marcus never left before 9, Devin set down his fork and said, "You need to start dating." Marcus looked up from his laptop. "Not now." Devin shrugged. "I am not saying find a wife tonight. I am just saying that a man who works 16 hours a day, goes home to a condo he treats like a hotel, and has not been on a date in 14 months is not thriving. He is hiding." Marcus started to object, but Devin kept going. "And before you say you do not have time, we both know that is not true. You made time for the Nashville deal. You made time for the Charlotte rezoning lawsuit. You made time for everything that has a return on investment. When are you going to invest in your own life?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Last 3 women I dated found out about the money inside 2 weeks. First one started talking about starting a boutique. Second one sent her cousin to pitch me a business plan. Third one €1." Devin's expression made him stop. "You already know about the third one." Devin nodded. "Kristen. The one who had signed a deal with a celebrity gossip blog to sell photos from their dates. That relationship had lasted 6 weeks and ended with Marcus's net worth appearing in a headline next to the word secret. You need to meet someone who does not know who you are," Devin said simply. "Meet someone as just Marcus. Not Marcus Webb the developer. Not the penthouse, not the car, not any of it. Just you. And see what happens." Marcus had not answered that night. He had eaten the rest of his takeout in silence, stared at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and thought about a 9-year-old girl holding his hand on the way to a group home. 3 weeks later, Brianna Cole walked into his life. And everything changed. Brianna Cole was 28 years old, 5'6", and the kind of beautiful that made people do double takes and then feel embarrassed about it. Not the manufactured beauty of filters and contouring and professional lighting, though she understood all of those things, but natural, effortless, the kind that came from good genes and 8 glasses of water and a grandmother who had taught her that moisturizer and prayer were equally essential daily practices. She was smart. Not textbook smart, though she had a business degree from Clark Atlanta that she had worked 2 jobs to pay for. She was people smart. Emotionally intelligent in a way that made her read a room before she walked fully into it, notice the person who was not laughing at the joke, remember the name of a stranger she had met once 18 months ago. She was the kind of woman who remembered birthdays and showed up to things and meant it when she asked how you were doing. She was also, on this particular Thursday afternoon, elbow deep in an argument with a commercial mixer that had decided to break down during the Thursday prep rush at Sweet Brown Sugar Bakery on Auburn Avenue. "Oh, you want to play with me today?" she said to the machine, her red apron dusted with powdered sugar, her box braids piled on top of her head in a messy bun that had been neater at 7 that morning. "You really want to do this?" The mixer word once, shuddered, and died. Brianna stood back, hands on her hips, and looked at it with the expression of a woman weighing her options. "Okay," she said. "We are doing this by hand." She had not inherited Sweet Brown Sugar. She had built it. After 3 years working as a pastry assistant at a downtown hotel, she had saved up $11,000, found a small storefront on Auburn Avenue with affordable rent, negotiated a 6-month lease, and opened her doors in January with 14 items on the menu and 0 customers. By March, the line was out the door. By June, a local food blog had called her peach pound cake the dessert Atlanta didn't know it needed. By October, she had a full staff of 4 and a waiting list for custom orders. She was not rich. She was not even comfortable, technically. She paid herself last, after rent and payroll and ingredients and utilities. She drove a 2017 Honda Accord that needed new brake pads and lived in a nice but modest apartment in East Atlanta with her best friend Chanel Washington, who worked in marketing and had very strong opinions about everything, including Brianna's love life, which had been, by mutual agreement, a disaster. There was Deshaun from Decatur, who had been charming right up until Brianna discovered he was also charming 3 other women simultaneously. There was Brandon, who loved Brianna deeply but loved his ex-wife's drama more. There was Kevin, who was wonderful on every level except for the small detail that he was also 22 years old, which Brianna had not discovered until the 3rd date when he mentioned his senior thesis. She had paid the check, wished him well, and driven home in silence. "I attract broken men," she told Chanel one night over wine on their apartment balcony, both of them barefoot, the Atlanta skyline glowing orange in the distance. Chanel shook her head. "You attract men who recognize that you will work to fix them. You need to stop being so available. You need to be harder to reach." "I do not want to be hard to reach," Brianna said. "I want to be with someone who does not need to be fixed. Someone who has already done the work on himself. Someone stable. Someone real." Chanel raised her glass. And fine, Brianna agreed. She was not asking for the moon. She was asking for the right kind of ordinary. A Thursday night dinner without drama. A man who meant what he said and said what he meant. Someone who saw her €1. Not her looks, not the bakery, not the potential €1, but her. The real her. The woman who cried at dog videos and knew every word to every Lauryn Hill song and sometimes sat on the bakery floor at 11 at night after the last employee left and talked to God about whether she was doing the right thing with her life. She was asking for something so simple it seemed impossible. She had no idea what was coming. It was the mixer that started everything. Because the mixer broke on a Thursday, and because the repair shop that the bakery used was 3 blocks away on Edgewood Avenue, and because Brianna decided to carry the machine herself rather than wait for a delivery service, she ended up standing on the sidewalk on Edgewood Avenue at 2:15 in the afternoon, struggling with a 40-pound commercial mixer, her red apron still on, her bun coming completely undone, her arms going numb, and about 18 inches from dropping the whole thing on the concrete. She did not drop it. Because a man appeared beside her, seemingly from nowhere, and caught the other side. "You good?" he said. She looked up. He was tall, not dramatically tall, but tall enough that she had to angle her chin up slightly. He was wearing dark jeans, clean but not designer, a plain gray crew neck, and sneakers. He had a warm brown complexion, close-cut hair with a line that was either very fresh or naturally perfect, and eyes that were doing something interesting. They were calm and alert at the same time, the way the eyes of a person look when they are genuinely paying attention. "I have it," she said, which was technically a lie because she very much did not have it. "You clearly have it," he said, and the corner of his mouth moved in a way that was not quite a smile but was related to one. "I am just going to walk beside you for a block in case gravity disagrees." She narrowed her eyes at him. And then, because there was nothing threatening about him and because her arms genuinely wanted to leave her body, she said, "Repair shop is on Edgewood, 2 blocks down." They walked 2 blocks. He carried his half of the mixer without complaint, or showing off. He did not overtalk, which she appreciated. He asked one question, "Your bakery?" "Sweet brown sugar," she said. "On Auburn." He nodded. "I walked by it last week. Peach pound cake in the window." "And you did not stop?" He looked at her sideways. "I should have." There was nothing overtly flirtatious about the way he said it. But something in the simplicity of it landed differently than the practiced lines she had been on the receiving end of for years. It was not a performance. It was just true. At the repair shop, they set the mixer down on the counter. The technician, a heavy-set man named Gerald who had been fixing Brianna's equipment for 3 years, looked at the machine, then at the man, then at Brianna. Brought reinforcements today? He helped me carry it, Brianna said quickly, because she had a very clear policy about not giving strangers the wrong impression. She turned to the man. Thank you? Seriously. He nodded. No problem. He turned to leave. And she watched him start to walk toward the door, and something in her, the same something that had made her open a bakery on a prayer and $11,000, the same something that made her say yes when every cautious bone in her body said wait, made her say, I am Brianna. He turned back around. His name, he told her, was Marcus. They exchanged numbers outside the repair shop. He texted that evening, a single line, peach pound cake was everything. You should be proud of what you built. She stared at that text for a full minute. Not because it was remarkable, but because of what it noticed. Not her. Not her looks. What she built. Nobody had led with that before. She wrote back, how do you know it was everything if you haven't tried it? His reply came fast, fair point. When can I? They had their first date 4 days later. He picked her up in a mid-sized Chevy Tahoe, clean but not flashy, and took her to a soul food restaurant in Kirkwood that she had never been to despite living in Atlanta her whole life. Not a trendy spot. Not somewhere a man takes a woman to impress her. Somewhere a man takes a woman because the food is actually good and the company will be worth tasting. The food was extraordinary. The company was better. Marcus Webb was unlike any man Brianna had dated. He was quiet in a way that felt intentional rather than empty. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He did not perform intelligence, he demonstrated it through the way he connected ideas, through the observation he had about her business model that was so precise she asked who he worked for, and he had said simply, real estate. Developments, mostly. What kind of developments? She asked. Commercial. Residential. Some mixed use. He picked up his water glass. I find undervalued properties and figure out what they can become. She had tilted her head at that. That sounds like more than a job. He looked at her directly. It is, he said. I grew up in places people had written off. Places everybody assumed were done. I know those places are not done. They just need someone to see the possibility in them. She was quiet for a moment. That is exactly why I put the bakery on Auburn Avenue instead of somewhere fancier, she said slowly. Because Auburn Avenue has history. It has roots. People forget what it used to be, but I have not forgotten. He smiled then. The real smile. Not the polite almost smile she had been receiving. A full, warm, genuine smile that changed his face entirely, and made something in her chest do something she was not ready for. Yeah, he said. I know exactly what you mean. By the end of the night, she had forgotten to check her phone for 4 hours. She had not done that since she was a teenager. Over the next 3 months, Marcus and Brianna built something that neither of them had experienced before, which was love without performance. No showing off. No positioning. No trying to seem like more than they were. He came to the bakery on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, always before the lunch rush, always ordered the same thing, a slice of whatever she had made that morning and a black coffee, and sat at the small corner table near the window reading. Not his phone. An actual book. Different book every time. She started looking forward to Tuesdays and Thursdays in a way that rearranged her whole week around them. She met him for lunch when he was available, which was not always easy because his schedule was unpredictable in the way schedules are when a man is genuinely busy rather than performing busyness to seem important. He never canceled on her. He rescheduled twice, both times with advance notice, a clear reason, and a specific alternative. She noted this carefully. Men who respected her time were rare. Men who did it without being asked were rarer still. He was generous in small ways. Not flashy, generous. He brought her food from restaurants he thought she would like, without making a production of it. He remembered that she mentioned her assistant Destiny's birthday and showed up with a small cake from a competitor bakery because he knew Brianna would think that was funny and also sweet. He fixed the loose hinge on the bakery's front door one Saturday morning because he was there when it happened and he had a tool kit in his truck. She noticed none of this was for show. There was no audience he was performing for. He fixed the hinge and went back to his book. He met Chanel for the first time at dinner in month 2. Chanel had a sharp eye and even sharper opinions, and she spent the first 45 minutes of the dinner evaluating Marcus with the quiet efficiency of a professional auditor. Afterward, in the car home, Brianna waited. Chanel was quiet for a full 2 minutes. Then she said, "He is the most emotionally stable man you have ever brought to a dinner." "That is a low bar," Brianna said. Chanel shook her head. "No. I mean genuinely. He is not performing anything. He is not trying to impress me. He is not trying to impress you, which is either the most confident thing I have ever seen or the most mature. He is just present." Brianna looked out the window. "Yeah," she said quietly. "He is." She learned his history in pieces slowly, the way he offered things, not as a flood, but like he was deciding in real time how much he trusted her with. She learned about Bankhead, about the group home, about Keisha, who was now 25 and working in social work in Decatur and was the most important person in Marcus's life. He talked about Keisha with a warmth he allowed nowhere else, a particular softness around the edges. When she met Keisha for the first time over Sunday brunch at a restaurant in Decatur, she understood why. Keisha Webb was a small woman with large energy, and her brother's same calm, watchful eyes. She hugged Brianna with a warmth that felt like assessment and welcome simultaneously. Over mimosas and shrimp and grits, she watched Brianna and Marcus talk, and once, while Marcus went to the restroom, leaned across the table and said very quietly, "He has not brought anyone to brunch in 4 years. Take good care of him." Brianna had looked down at her hands, genuinely moved. "I intend to." She had meant it. In that moment, sitting in that sunny restaurant in Decatur, watching Marcus cross the room toward her with that particular walk of his unhurried, confident, self-contained, she had meant every syllable. That was the tragedy that was coming. Not that she had never meant it, but that she would one day choose to stop. Here is what Brianna did not know. Here is what made all of it complicated and painful and, in the end, irreversible. Marcus was watching. Not the way a controlling man watches, not from suspicion or jealousy or insecurity, but from the place that childhood abandonment carves in a person, that place that can never quite believe that good things stay, that can never quite accept love at face value, that needs to verify before it fully invests. He had been betrayed before. Not just by Kristen and her gossip blog deal. Before her, his first serious relationship, at 24, a woman named Aaliyah who had told him she loved him and meant it right up until his business started doing well, at which point she had quietly switched allegiances to a man with more money and more status and had never once apologized. His second, at 28, a woman named Simone who had been patient and devoted for a year before he discovered, through Devon's research, that she was being paid by a competing developer to access information from Marcus's personal life. Neither of them had been entirely lying when they said they cared. But neither of them had been entirely telling the truth either. And so Marcus watched. Carefully. Methodically. Not with cameras or surveillance, he was not that man, but with the natural intelligence of someone who had survived by reading situations accurately from an early age. He watched what Brianna did when he was not looking. How she treated the people she did not need anything from. How she talked about money when the subject came up. What she valued when no one was watching her value it. What he saw, in those first 3 months, was mostly good. He saw her pay her employees on time and sometimes early when she knew someone was going through a hard stretch. He saw her treat the delivery drivers and the cleaning crew with the same respect she gave paying customers. He saw her genuinely excited about a book she found at a thrift store in Little 5 Points, waving it at him across the bakery with the unbridled enthusiasm of a child. And it was not a performance because she had not known he was going to be there that day. He saw her, on a Tuesday morning, give the last 2 pastries left in the display case to a woman and her son who clearly had very little, and then go in the back and not say a word about it to anyone. He saw all of this, and the wall he had built methodically over 20 years began, brick by brick, to come down. But he had one more test. Not because he doubted her, but because he needed to know, needed to be absolutely certain before he offered her the thing he had never offered anyone. His full self. His full life. All of it. He needed to know who she was when everything he had vanished. Devin thought the plan was extreme. Devin said it on a Tuesday morning sitting across from Marcus in the Webb Equity Group boardroom with a look on his face that blended loyalty with concern. "You are about to propose to this woman," he said. "Why can't you just trust what you have seen?" "Because what I have seen is Marcus with the Tahoe and the nice dinners and the stable job in real estate," Marcus said quietly. "She has never seen me struggling. She has never seen me with nothing. And I grew up with nothing, Devin. I need to know that who I am when I have nothing is still someone she wants." Devin leaned back. "And if she fails the test? Then I know before the ring." There was a long silence. Devin rubbed his face with both hands. "When you say disguise yourself as a poor man, what exactly does that mean?" Marcus told him. Devin stared at him for a very long time. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and said, "I am going to support you in this, because that is my job. But I want it on record that I think this is necessary," Marcus said. Devin was quiet. He walked to the door. The word he had been about to say was dangerous. But he did not say it. He went to make arrangements instead. Devin was exceptional at his job. Which is why, within 2 weeks, Marcus Webb, CEO of Webb Equity Group, had quietly transferred the operational running of his company to his senior management team for what was announced internally as a personal sabbatical. His penthouse in Buckhead was available but unused. The Range Rover that he actually drove, the one Brianna had never seen because it was not the kind of thing he wanted to lead with, was garaged. His financial life, the real financial life, was invisible. What remained, or appeared to remain, was the simplest version of Marcus. The mid-range Chevy Tahoe with 112,000 miles on it. A studio apartment in East Point, modest and clean but exactly the kind of apartment a man in mid-level real estate work rented when work dried up. A new phone number that Devin connected to a basic plan. Clothes he had shopped for specifically, not worn or dirty, but clearly not expensive. Not name brand. Just functional. Clean. The backstory was uncomplicated because Marcus hated complication. He had simply told Brianna, 4 days after Devin put the infrastructure in place, that his company had hit some serious difficulties. A deal he had staked too much on had collapsed. A lawsuit from a previous partner had frozen significant assets. He was downsizing, restructuring, figuring things out. He said it with the matter-of-fact steadiness of a man who was not asking for sympathy, just being honest. Brianna's response in that first moment had been everything he had hoped for. She had not flinched. She had not immediately asked how much. She had looked at him directly and said, "How are you holding up? Not your money. Not your business. You." He had almost called the whole test off right there. But he needed to see more. Because the beginning is always easy. Anyone can be gracious in the first 5 minutes of bad news. The test is in the weeks that follow. The test is in the days when the bills are real and the future is uncertain and the shine has worn off of sacrifice. He moved into the East Point apartment over a weekend. Devin had furnished it practically. Brianna helped him carry boxes. She brought food, containers of home-cooked things, rice and chicken and the sweet potato pie he had once mentioned was his favorite. She set up his kitchen with real care, found where things should go, taped a little note on the inside of the cabinet door that said, "You built something once. You will build it again." Stop stressing and eat. He had folded that note and put it in his wallet. It was still there. That first month was a study in who Brianna Cole truly was, and the study, for the first 4 weeks, was extraordinary. She did not change. Or she changed in directions he had not expected. She became more open, somehow. More present. As if the removal of the financial ease had stripped away the small pressure to be impressive, and what was left was just two people being real with each other in a real way. She drove him places when his schedule overlapped with hers without making it a thing. She paid for dinner twice in the first 2 weeks, and waved away his protest. She said once, late at night sitting on his small balcony looking at the East Point skyline, which was considerably less dramatic than Buckhead, "I have been broke. I know what it feels like to look at your account and want to cry. You do not have to perform okay around me. Just be however you are." He had looked at her in the dark and thought, this woman is real. This woman is the one. He had nearly told her everything that night. The whole truth. All of it. He did not. Because Devin had set a timeline of 90 days. Because Marcus, despite everything he felt, needed to complete what he had started. Because the ghosts of Aaliyah and Simone and Kristen and every version of betrayal he had absorbed since Bank had whispered that it was too soon, that it was not enough, that he needed to be sure. He would regret waiting. He would regret it for a very long time. It was Chanel who first noticed Brianna's ambivalence. But it was Brianna herself who felt it first, in the privacy of her own head, in the place she did not say aloud. The truth was not simple. The truth, as it almost always is, had layers. Brianna loved Marcus. That was real. She loved the way he listened. She loved the steadiness of him, the quiet confidence, the sense she had always had around him that the world was a more manageable place. That was all real, and it did not disappear when the money did. But pressure had a way of finding the cracks that were already there. Brianna's mother, Denise Cole, was a woman of very practical philosophy. She had raised Brianna alone after Brianna's father left when Brianna was 7, and she had done it with grace and grit, and a weariness she never fully lost. She was not a cruel woman. She was a pragmatic one. When she heard, through Brianna, that Marcus's business was struggling, Denise's response was delivered over the phone on a Wednesday morning in a tone that was thoughtful but unmistakable. "Baby, I am not saying he is not a good man. I am saying you have spent 3 years building something, and you are at a fragile place in that business right now. You cannot afford to take on somebody else's financial instability. Not now." Brianna had been stirring batter when the call came in. She had not answered right away. She had stirred in silence and said finally, "I hear you, Mama." Which was not the same as agreeing. But it was not disagreeing either. And then there was Chanel. Chanel, who loved Brianna fiercely and wanted only good things for her, but who had a particular blind spot about money that came from her own childhood of watching her parents fight about bills until the marriage dissolved. Chanel's view of romantic partnership was fundamentally contractual, not in a cynical way, but in a protective way. She wanted Brianna safe. And in Chanel's internal map, safety had a $sign. She said nothing directly for the first 3 weeks. But Brianna could feel it in the silences between Chanel's questions about Marcus, in the way Chanel would ask how is he doing in the tone that meant she was asking about financial progress, not emotional state. And then, 6 weeks into the test, 43 days after Marcus had moved into the East Point apartment, Brianna's commercial oven broke. Not a small problem. A total failure. The estimated repair was $4,200. Or the replacement oven, which she actually needed given how old the machine was $9,000. She had $3,000 in her business account, and a payment coming in at the end of the week that would bring it to $4,500. She was fine. It was tight, but she was fine. But it did not feel fine. It felt like the world pressing on all sides simultaneously. The bakery, her mother's voice, Chanel's meaningful silences, and Marcus €. Marcus, who she loved and who was dealing with his own financial stress and who she could not ask for help because what would that even look like? All of it arrived at once in the kitchen of Sweet Brown Sugar on a Thursday morning, and Brianna Cole sat on the flour-dusted floor and cried in a way she had not cried in years. She did not call Marcus. She called Chanel. And Chanel came. And Chanel held her. And Chanel said all the right things about strength and resilience, and how Brianna had handled worse. But then, after the tears stopped and the tea was made, Chanel said something that planted a seed so small and so dangerous that neither of them realized what it was. "You know Darius Langston has been asking about you." Brianna looked up. "What?" Chanel's expression was carefully neutral. "He asked Carmen about you last week. At the networking event. He has been following the bakery on social for months, apparently. Carmen says he mentioned you specifically." Darius Langston. The name settled in the room like a dropped penny. Darius Langston was 35, old money Atlanta. His family had been in real estate development for 3 generations. He was handsome in the polished way that came from never having to worry about rent, with tailored everything and a social media presence that telegraphed wealth without trying to. He was also, by every account Brianna had ever heard, charming. Not deep charming like Marcus, but surface charming, which was the kind that worked on bad days. Brianna shook her head. "I am with Marcus." "I know," Chanel said. "I am just telling you what I heard." She left it there. She did not push. She did not have to. The seed was in the ground. Marcus noticed the change the way you notice a temperature drop, not with one dramatic moment but with a gradual accumulation of small cooling. She was still present. She still called. She still came to the East Point apartment 2 or 3 evenings a week, still brought food, still laughed at his jokes, still lay with her head on his chest watching documentaries about things neither of them had ever thought about before. She still kissed him in the particular way she had that made him feel like everything in the world had stopped to pay attention. But something was different in the current running beneath all of it. A hesitation. A slight delay in responding to texts that had not existed before. A distraction in her eyes when they were together, brief and quickly covered, but there. He was good at reading people. He had been reading people for survival since he was 11 years old. He felt it. He said nothing. He texted Devin on a Tuesday, "Something is shifting. I am not sure what it is." Devin's reply came 20 minutes later. "Do you want me to look into anything?" Marcus stared at the text for a long time. Then he wrote, "Not yet." He needed to see it for himself. The thing that confirmed his sense was not dramatic. It was a dinner. Brianna had been invited to a networking event, a mixer for Atlanta business owners, the kind of thing she attended twice a year and that Marcus had accompanied her to once before. She had not mentioned this one until 2 days before it, which was unusual. She had not invited him, which she always did. When he brought it up, lightly, curious, not accusatory, she said it was a professional thing, that she did not want to mix business with personal right now, that she needed to focus. All of those were reasonable things to say. None of them were dishonest. But none of them were quite true either. He did not push. He said, "Of course. Go do your thing." He texted Devin that night, "I need to be at the mixer on Thursday. I need the full disguise." Devin replied, "I will have it ready." The mixer was at a rooftop venue in Midtown, the kind of well-lit, well-dressed event where Atlanta's business community performed its best version of itself. Open bar. Catered food. A DJ who kept the volume low enough for conversations and high enough to signal that this was still a good time. Marcus arrived early, which was something he always did because he liked to see the room before the room saw him. In his disguise, the worn hoodie, the scuffed Jordans, the cap pulled low, he was effectively invisible. Nobody at a rooftop mixer in Midtown looked twice at a man dressed like a delivery driver who had wandered in. Nobody in that world ever looked at people they considered below them. He had counted on that. He had grown up knowing exactly how that worked. He found a corner, and he waited. Brianna arrived at 7:15, and the room noticed. She had dressed carefully, not over the top, but with the particular intention of a woman who knew she was going to be seen. A dark burgundy dress, fitted but not loud. Her braids down tonight. The kind of makeup that enhanced rather than masked. She was beautiful in the way Marcus had always found her beautiful, but tonight there was a different energy around it, a readiness he had not seen before. He watched her move through the room. She worked it the way a professional worked it, handshakes, business cards, easy laughter, genuine interest. She was good at this. He had always appreciated that about her. She had not come here to be decorative. She had come to work. And then, 30 minutes in, a man crossed the room toward her. And Marcus understood, watching the man's walk, his posture, his expression, that this was not an accidental meeting. Darius Langston was everything that Marcus, in his disguise, was not. He wore a dark suit that cost more than the East Point apartment's monthly rent. His watch caught the rooftop lights in a way that announced itself. He was tall, cut from the cloth of a man who had attended private schools and taken international vacations and never once in his life been uncertain about whether the bill would be paid. He reached Brianna and extended a hand, and she took it, and her face did something that Marcus had to file away and look at later because it was too much information to process in real time. She smiled. She smiled the way people smile when they are pleasantly surprised to see someone they have been thinking about. Marcus watched them talk. He was too far to hear, but he was close enough to read the body language, and the body language was a language he was fluent in. Darius leaned in. Brianna did not lean away. Darius said something that made her laugh, head slightly back, hand briefly to her chest. She handed him a business card, and he held it with both hands, which was a particular gesture of deliberate formality that meant he was performing old money manners. She accepted his card in return. 20 minutes. They talked for 20 minutes. And in those 20 minutes, Marcus Webb watched the woman he planned to propose to conduct herself like a woman who was available. He left before she saw him. He walked down the stairs, through the lobby, onto the midtown street, and stood in the warm Atlanta night with his hands in the front pocket of the hoodie and his jaw working silently. He pulled out his phone. He texted Devin, "We go to phase 3. Devin's reply was immediate. "Are you sure?" Marcus looked back at the building. Somewhere above him, Brianna was still laughing at something Darius Langston had said. "Completely," he wrote back. The next phase arrived not with drama but with the quiet weight of a door closing. Marcus arranged what Devin called the financial collapse narrative. Not elaborate theater. Marcus did not have patience for theater. Just a series of real-seeming conversations with Brianna over the following 3 weeks, each one adding another layer to a picture of a man whose situation was deteriorating. A second lawsuit from the same partner, this one more serious. Assets frozen? A consulting work contract that had fallen through. The apartment lease coming up and the question of whether he would renew it. He was not lying about these things in the way a liar lies. He was testing the temperature of a woman he loved by turning the heat down and watching what she reached for. He hated himself a little for it. Devin said so directly, which was something Devin did when he felt the situation required it, and Marcus respected him enough to hear it. "You are manipulating someone you say you love. I understand why. But be honest with yourself that that is what this is." Marcus had been honest with himself. He had sat with the discomfort of Devin's words for a full night. And then he had thought about Keisha at 9 years old holding his hand in the rain, and about all the versions of himself he had rebuilt from nothing, and about the specific kind of destruction that came from loving someone fully and discovering, too late, that the love was conditional. He had gotten up the next morning and continued the test. Brianna's responses tracked, at first, along the line he had hoped for. Concern. Practical support. She had quietly looked up financial resources for small business owners going through litigation. She had texted him articles. She had once mentioned that if it came down to it, she had a couch he could sleep on. She had said it lightly, like it was nothing. But he had seen the truth of it in her eyes. But the weeks were doing something to her. He could feel it more and more clearly. The calls became shorter. Not cold, she was not cold. But efficient in a way they had not been. The evenings at the apartment became less frequent. She said she was busy, which was true. The bakery was going through a growth period, new wholesale orders, a catering inquiry from a downtown hotel. He celebrated all of this with genuine joy because he was genuinely proud of her. But the busyness had a convenient quality to it, a timing that coincided too neatly with the increasing difficulty of his situation. And then Chanel told her about the Darius Langston encounter from Darius Langston's perspective. Brianna told Marcus about it honestly or partially honestly. She said Darius had reached out through a mutual contact, that he was interested in potentially partnering on a project that could benefit the bakery, some kind of community development initiative he was working on that involved local food businesses. She said it with the practiced lightness of someone who had rehearsed the telling. Marcus listened. He said, "That is interesting. What did you say?" "I said I was open to hearing more," Brianna said. "It is just business." He nodded. "Okay." She paused, clearly expecting a different response. He did not give her one. He went back to the documentary they had been watching. She watched him for a moment with an expression that was partly relieved and partly, in a way she would not have acknowledged, disappointed. As if she had wanted him to fight harder. As if the absence of a fight was itself, in her mind, evidence of something. She was wrong about what it evidenced. But she was not wrong to notice it. Darius Langston called 3 times over the next 2 weeks. Brianna told Marcus about the first call. She did not mention the second. Marcus knew about the third only because Devin, who had eyes on more things than Marcus asked him to, mentioned it carefully one morning over the phone. He did not react. He absorbed it. He filed it. He continued the test. The dinner happened on a Friday night that Brianna had told Marcus she was going to Chanel's for a girls' night. This was not entirely false, Chanel was present. But the dinner was at a restaurant in Buckhead, an expensive one, and Darius Langston was the host, and there were 3 other couples present in a configuration that any objective observer would recognize as the social architecture of a formal courtship. Brianna was seated next to Darius. Chanel was seated across the table with a glass of wine and the expression of someone who had told herself this was just business, and almost believed it. Marcus was not there. He knew about it because Devin had learned about it, and Devin had told him, and the question of what to do with that information had sat between them like a stone. What he did was nothing. He did not call. He did not confront. He texted Brianna at 9 p.m. "Hope girls' night is good." She texted back at 9:14, "It is great. You good?" He looked at that text for a very long time. The ellipsis was particularly brutal. The breezy enthusiasm of a woman who was somewhere she had not told him she was, responding to his text with performance rather than truth. "Good," he wrote. "Talk tomorrow." She sent a heart emoji. She was at a candlelit dinner with Darius Langston. She sent a heart emoji. Devin texted an hour later, "I am sorry, man." Marcus set the phone down on the kitchen counter of the East Point apartment, and stood in the small kitchen in the dark and breathed. He was not going to cry. He had made a promise in the rain in Bankhead when he was 11 years old. He was not going to break it in a studio apartment in East Point when he was 33. He was going to finish the test. And then he was going to make a decision. The next 3 weeks were the slow-motion version of a building coming down. Not explosive. Just structural. The kind of collapse where, if you knew what you were watching, you could see each supporting wall fail in sequence, each one buying a little time before the next one gave way. Brianna was not a villain in this story. He needed to be clear about that, in his own mind, because the temptation was to simplify her, to make her the betrayer and himself the betrayed, the way stories get told when they hurt. But the truth was more complicated and ultimately more devastating. Brianna was a woman under pressure. A woman whose mother worried about stability, and said so directly. A woman whose best friend, despite her real love, had a specific lens about money and security that was filtering everything she saw. A woman whose bakery needed a growth partner, and whose romantic partner appeared, to her, to be financially spiraling. A woman who had been hungry in her life, not bankhead hungry, not truly hungry, but the specific hunger of watching a single mother make a dollar stretch until it tore, and who carried that hunger in her body like a low-grade injury that never fully healed. She was also a woman who had met a man who was polished and wealthy and specifically interested in her in the particular moment, when her romantic partner seemed most uncertain. The timing was catastrophic. The way temptation always chooses its moment with a terrible precision. She had not kissed Darius Langston. She had not told Marcus she was done. She had not done the clean, unambiguous thing. What she had done was the messy, human, complicated thing. She had let herself be courted by someone else while still technically present in her relationship, telling herself that she was being practical, that she was protecting herself, that she was just keeping her options open. She had not left, but she had started to leave. And there was a moment, one specific night, 3 weeks before the end, where the door swung fully open and she walked through it. Club Onyx. A charity gala that Darius had invited her to, which she attended without telling Marcus she was going at all. A gold dress. An open bar. 8 hours during which Marcus Webb, in his worn hoodie and his cap pulled low, stood in the corner and watched the woman he had planned to spend his life with lean close to another man in the VIP section and whisper something in his ear. She did not kiss him, but she touched his arm the way women touch the arm of a man they have decided matters. She laughed the way she had laughed with Marcus in the beginning, easy and full and real. She let Darius Langston hold her hand to the dance floor, and she did not pull it away. Marcus watched all of it. He watched with the discipline of a man who had learned to endure because endurance was the price of clarity. He pulled out his phone. He texted Devin 2 words. "It's done." But done did not mean over. It meant the real story was only just beginning. Because Marcus Webb had not survived everything he had survived to walk away quietly. And Brianna Cole had not built what she built to lose it all over one season of fear. What happens when a man who has been watching decides it is finally time to be seen? What happens when the truth walks back through the door in a charcoal suit and puts its name on a building 3 blocks from your bakery? What happens when the woman who chose comfort over loyalty comes face to face with exactly what she gave up? You are about to find out.